everyone, and welcome to Do What You Can for the People, the show that nobody asked for. I'm really excited to have my guest today, Laura Patricelli. Laura is the creative genius behind Design Mastermind. She works with solo entrepreneurs and small businesses to create beautiful and compelling websites. And I'm so excited to have her today to talk to us about the importance of branding when you're just getting started. So Laura, I thought we'd start with some branding 101. Can you tell me in your words what you think branding is?
Thank you so much for having me, Nikki. I am so excited to be here. What I really want to say is why branding is important to think about even when you're just starting out. Because a lot of people kind of gloss over branding because they don't really fully understand it. And all branding really is a set of guidelines that you have in place for your business visually. So really all that means is having a logo, a color palette, and some fonts that you can use consistently throughout all your marketing materials so that it's recognizable as your business. And what's important to know about this when you're starting out is that really when you focus on creating a look and feel that really works for your business and that represents who you are and is appealing to your market, you don't have to redo it later on. The biggest mistake I see a lot of new businesses make with regards to branding is that they do it on the cheap or they don't really put much thought into it up front. And what ends up happening is that then they have to redo it like a year or 2 years down the line. And it just is a big expense because then you have to redo a lot of the templates and materials that you've already spent time making for your business to be in line with the new standards that you create. And it's just a logo and colors and fonts. I mean, it's really just a simple foundation for your brand that as long as it really represents you and is something that you're proud to show off, you can use that logo for years before rebranding.
That's so true. I used to call my brand my digital uniform. But
Mm-hmm.
I think as I've gotten older and with time, and especially since I'm still using the logo I used back in 2011, I've really come to think of my brand as more as like my capsule wardrobe, where it's timeless and it's classic and it was the most basic version of me, but it's grown with me through the years.
Exactly. And a lot of times when you try and do too much too fast, you haven't had a chance to grow into your business and figure out exactly who your market even is at that point. So keeping it simple and classic right from the start is, yeah, I totally agree with that. A lot of people, they try and overcomplicate it or undercomplicate it, but keeping it simple and just sticking to it is really important.
Totally agree. And so according to you, you've mentioned things like your logo and your colors and stuff like that, but what is the anatomy of a brand?
Yeah, so that really is the anatomy of a brand. The logo is not just one graphic, but it's like a set of graphics that contains the text of what your business name is. It's also your business name itself. I'm actually struggling with a client right now to define their business name because a lot of the names we're coming up with are already taken. And that's a big part of what your brand is. That's like the face of your business. And putting thought into what to even call your brand is, I would say, the first step to actually creating that brand that we're talking about. And doing your research too. You don't want to get sued a year from now for using a brand that's already been copyrighted or registered as a trademark. So it's stuff to consider. A simple Google search is usually all you need to do to figure out whether the name that you've fallen in love with is something you should move forward with or not. When it comes to choosing colors, you can keep it simple to start, but I like to really add a lot of variation to my palettes just to give you more options to choose from that are all consistent no matter where you're promoting yourself. I have like a blue color scheme that I like to use as well as a purple. But again, that's a little bit more advanced. Even just picking one color, like you, Nikki, you have that purple color that you use throughout your brand or throughout your website and your marketing materials. And that's enough to start. Getting the opinion of a professional designer when it comes to putting your palette together is usually a good idea, even if it's just for them to say, yes, that does not suck.
Totally agree. And I think that we'll talk a little bit about some best practices and tools a little bit later, but there are so many tools out there. Like I use one called coolers.com that you can just put in your primary color and then hit the space bar and it'll give you a bunch of complementary colors. So there's definitely ways to go about it, either with a professional or if you're just starting out and you really have no idea with what resonates with you, you can just go in and like drop in your favorite color and see what some of those other ones are.
Oh,
So
yeah.
maybe let's talk a little bit about some of those best practices and tools. I know you have your brand blueprint, which is kind of about developing a social media presence. So maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I actually really would rather talk about the quiz right now, because I think that a lot of times people don't really know where to start when they are creating a brand. So on designmastermind.com/quiz, I have a signature brand style quiz that I put together. And what it does is it uses basic traits of your personality to give you a general look and feel that you can move forward with in your brand. Once you know whether you're clean and professional or bright and bold, you can use those words, those terms, to piece together the brand components that I mentioned earlier in a way that is true to you and your style and your personality. Of course, that's only one piece of it. And if you do take the quiz, I offer like a cheat sheet that at least just gets you started with a few ideas of what your brand might want to look like. And that's just a way to take your personality and your style preferences and translate them into the branding, marketing, online sphere. Because a lot of times people, they think of the online presence as something that's completely separate from themselves. But especially if you're an entrepreneur or you're creating something that is a representation of you, if you're selling your services as a consultant, as a coach, whatever, you're really going to want to bring your style and your personality into your brand. And people see a disconnect there, but there really isn't one. In terms of even choosing a color scheme, just to go back to what we were talking about before, Coolors is an excellent resource. I recommend Coolors. It's Coolors. We'll link in the footer, I'm sure. But using that and taking colors that you already wear in your wardrobe or have up in your house or apartment, starting from what you already like and figuring out how those colors can translate best into your marketing, that's just a perfect place to start, because it's stuff that you've already created for yourself over the course of your entire life. I mean, you probably have a pretty good idea of what your style is. And the quiz that I put together is really just trying to take those preferences and translate them into the online world.
That's so true. And I think that when you go through your own personal life and you think of your brand as an extension of yourself, it just starts to feel so much more natural. You're not forcing it, and you're not overthinking it, because it's something that you said, like you've been doing it your whole life. So I love that piece of advice. What are some of your other favorite tools for getting online, for building your online presence?
Oh,
And we
definitely.
will link everything down below.
Sure. Yeah, that sounds great. So definitely Canva. I love Canva. I use it for my clients to create templates for them. Canva is a resource that lets you create graphics online. And it's actually fairly cheap to get the pro version. And it's really worth upgrading just to be able to have access to all of the stock photos, graphics, and fonts that they have available. They also have a set of templates that you can use for your marketing, just as a jumping off point, because there's nothing worse than staring at a blank screen. There's nothing worse than starting from scratch and feeling like this daunting weight of where do I even begin? And Canva completely eliminates that. When it comes to building a website, depending on how complex you're looking for, Squarespace is an excellent tool just to get started. With a Squarespace website, you don't have to worry as much about it looking like crap, because as long as you have some backgrounds, photos to work with, then they're going to give you templates right out of the box that are really easy to work with. However, if you're working with a graphic designer, or you want to eventually be able to create online courses or create a more robust online presence, I do recommend using WordPress. It does have the learning curve is a little steeper with WordPress. It's a lot harder to customize a Squarespace site. So if you're looking for a really custom experience, I would go ahead and just take the plunge and familiarize yourself with WordPress, because it'll be worth it for just the sheer amount of stuff you can do with WordPress in terms of creating membership sites, selling products online, creating a custom experience on your website. That all is very possible with WordPress. That also might be a little bit advanced.
Just a quick question. So I'm a little bit familiar with web design. I've built a lot of my websites on my own, and I've actually had you help me build a few of my websites in the past, and they've been amazing. I'm currently on Squarespace, so I'm wondering for myself and maybe someone who's watching, if you start on Squarespace by yourself, is it difficult to then hire someone and transition over to WordPress?
No, because the templates that you have in Squarespace and the website that you're most likely making in Squarespace is not that complex.
Right.
It's basically a digital business card. That is what you are making when you create a WordPress site. So translating that WordPress site or that Squarespace site onto WordPress is fairly easy, because the website itself is not super complex.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of exporting the blog posts, which
Right.
you can then import into WordPress fairly easily using their import tool, and just bringing the visuals over, which they're probably your photos and backgrounds that you're using anyway. So as long as you have access to those, it's pretty easy to then switch over to Squarespace, or excuse me, switch over to WordPress once you have outgrown Squarespace, which probably will happen if you're an online entrepreneur, and that is the main way that people interact with your brand.
Yeah, but I guess if you're biting at the chomp to just get started and you want something that looks mediocre, like passable, definitely go with Squarespace. I've had the best experience there, and it's super easy to manage on my own.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, back to you. Any other tools that you recommend?
Let's see. Honestly, just getting started with Canva is enough for the visual element. You can make logos in Canva, you can export them. Familiarizing yourself with Canva as a tool is extremely important when you're doing a lot of your brand materials, marketing, etc. yourself. So it's worth taking their design school and just learning as much as you can about their interface, because the more familiar you are with Canva, the more confident you'll be in creating those resources and those marketing materials. Again, Coolers is excellent. Highly recommend using Coolers to create a color palette. And of course, taking the quiz that I mentioned before is going to help you at least have some sort of idea for the look and feel. In that note, I would like to mention Pinterest as a branding tool. I use Pinterest with my clients. I ask them to go in and create a board of stuff that they think looks good. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you do decide to work with a graphic designer, being able to take a Pinterest board and just hand it over and say, this is my style, have at it. It just makes our lives so much easier. It also is going to make your life easier, because the more you look at Pinterest, the more you find stuff that actually represents your style and your unique brand, the easier it will be to create stuff in Canva or create a color palette in Coolers. It's also a great place to find color palettes pre-made that you already love. There's actually a Chrome extension called Color Picker, and it lets you pick a color from the page to add that hex code to your coolers palette. So if you find a color or a palette that you really like, using the color picker extension will let you grab that color and add it to your palette and just keep it for your brand.
I love that. And I also recommend using Pinterest if you're planning a photo shoot for your brand, because then you have a full mood board essentially that you can share with your graphic designer, with your photographer, with yourself, so that everything stays cohesive. Right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. And did you want to talk about photo shoots? Because I can do a quick thing on.
Yeah, we could talk a little bit. I know you have a great guide on photo shoots. It's what I used before I did mine.
I do. It's designmastermind.com/photo shoot. It's an incredible guide, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that's in it, because I think that the photo shoot is the missing piece of your brand, the anatomy of your brand, that I didn't mention before. Your photo shoot should happen after you've put your color palette together. That's really a main thing, because the last thing I want is for you to put all this effort into hiring a photographer and getting a shoot, but then you kind of hate the colors, right? Because maybe they clash.
Yep.
I'm experiencing this right now with my client in California, where she has this like orange couch in all of her photos.
Oh no.
But the colors that we're using are like hot pink and blue for her brand.
It's too loud.
Yeah, I'm actually having to color correct the couch to make it a little bit softer and less saturated. So I can do it because I'm a professional photo editor, but you want to have a pretty clear idea of what colors to bring into your outfits, into the background, because the more on brand you can make your photo shoot, the longer it'll last. Because the last thing you want is to have to redo your photos a year from now after you've spent $2,000 on a lifestyle photographer. And just being able to put effort into what you want the final product of your photo shoot to look like, that's going to make a huge difference in whether you use those photos for 10 years or 10 months.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that. I mean, one way to avoid that, like say you've already booked your photo shoot, is to just go for really neutral things, I think is always desirable.
Black and white.
Black and white, normal backgrounds, just keep things simple. And that's another way to kind of extend the lifetime of that photo shoot. So
Exactly.
Don't worry if you've already booked your photo shoot without getting your colors together. There's still a way to get to the point you want to be at.
Exactly.
So I think the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, so we've talked about how to do it on your own and how to do it with hiring a professional like you, but something that we've gone back and forth about is the value in outsourcing via like an Upwork or Fiverr. And I'd love to hear your take on that.
Sure. So one part about outsourcing, it can be a little tricky, especially with design. You do want to look at their portfolio and make sure that their design sensibility goes well with your look and feel of what you want. You'll be able to tell the experience level of a designer just from looking at their portfolio. You want to, when you're starting out, maybe spend a little bit more on your logo and branding than you would on other stuff. If you're looking to hire a professional designer, you want to spend at least 500, maybe 1,000 on your logo. You do not want to go on the cheap, because you're going to just have to redo it eventually anyway. One thing to maybe go on the cheap with is bringing someone on board to do your social media and marketing, because there's so many templates available that if you have that brand foundation that we talked about, if you can give them a logo, fonts, and colors that are your brand, then they'll be able to use that and move forward with it. And you don't have to spend $100 an hour on that type of design work. You can usually find a virtual assistant who has experience with social media design and Canva. You can usually find someone like that for anywhere between $20 and $50 an hour. Again, the more you spend, the more experience they have. And that's something to keep in mind as you're looking to spend money on your business.
Absolutely. And if I could just add there, even though you may have the basics, the building blocks of your logo, your fonts, your colors, the value add of hiring someone from an Upwork or a Fiverr is that they're freeing up your time. And so you really need to think about it in that sense, where I could spend the 2 hours to make all this social media stuff, or I could spend the 40 to $100 and have someone else do it for me to have those 2 hours to get back to doing what I need to be doing for my business. So just wanted to add
Exactly.
that caveat.
Yes, exactly. And think of your hourly rate. Think of what you charge and then think, okay, I'm not going to be spending that much on outsourcing. I think that all the time.
Mhm.
Like, well, my hourly rate is like $150 an hour. So I I could do it myself, but then I have to think it's as if I'm spending $150 an hour for me to do it versus hiring somebody at $30 an hour to do a job that is maybe 90% done. And then, if anything, if you're super picky, you can just take it from 90% to 100%, and it's still going to save you so much time not having to do it from scratch.
Absolutely. People always forget about the opportunity cost, but it's really important. All
That's so
right.
true.
So that's it for my questions. I just thought I'd open it up to you if you had any other closing thoughts, give you an opportunity to share with us where people can find you, what you're willing to offer them, and of course, we'll include links to everything down below.
Sure. So, my business, I specialize in high-end web design. So, I work with entrepreneurs a lot of times who have some money built up to reinvest in their business. However, I do offer, and I want to talk about my Kickstart with Confidence package. It's a gorgeous one-page website designed and built in WordPress. And it's a training session too to get you familiar with WordPress so that you can go in and edit the content, add new pages, and expand your site on your own. It also includes a full brand development package. So if you're worried about handing off your logo and branding work to somebody who's less than experienced, you can trust that you have my 10 years as a professional high-end graphic designer to support your business as it grows. If you're just starting out and you want to learn more about me, um, I would try the quiz at designmastermind.com/quiz. That's going to give you an idea of what I do and who I serve just from downloading the freebie at the end of the quiz. If you go to designmastermind.com, you'll have access to my portfolio. And if you want to talk more, then you can book a call direct to my calendar straight from my website.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laura. This has been so helpful and always a pleasure to speak with you. Looking forward to many more chats in the future. We'd love to have you back and hear about what you're doing in a couple months.
I love that. Thanks so much, Nikki. I really appreciate it.